Biggest challenge is definitely affordability. Credit, unfortunately, is just not a common sense game. You could be making the same offer and have a leg up. You do not need to have perfect credit in order to qualify and buy a home these days.
You're like literally a loan stud. Anytime I get a buyer, I want to send them to you because I have full confidence that if they're in your hands, they're getting the best advice.
Our goal is to help you accomplish your objectives in both home buying, real estate, and just overall finances. It arms you with so much information.
We could very well be in a super cycle. We're in uncharted territory.
Cheapest is not always best, right? Cheaper, there's probably some real danger in what you're going to get.
What can a buyer listening to today open their eyes to understanding that formula?
For FHA loans, it goes down to a minimum credit score of
What? You're my very first interview, and I waited and waited because I didn't want to talk to anybody else first. I want to talk to you because you're like literally a loan stud. Like you're in the top 0.5% of loan officers nationwide. You have been my preferred lender for damn near the majority of my real estate career. And anytime I get a buyer, I want to send them to you because I need to know. I have full confidence that if they're in your hands, they're getting the best advice. They're getting somebody who really understands lending, looking at their financial situation and helping them structure, the smartest purchase that they can. And it's you always give people great advice on, hey, maybe we shouldn't put that much down on principal because you don't need all that cash down to get your payment where you want it. So now you've got extra cash on hand to do other things, to reinvest, because a lot of people just think, here's my whole wad, let me put it down on the principal, and it's like, keep some of those shekels in your pocket for a rainy day. You may need them. Let's not be house rich and cash broke. And you give great advice. You also clean up a lot of shit that other lenders, dump in my lap. And so that's why I'm excited to go into some of these questions for buyers in this podcast interview, from you so that they can benefit from your knowledge when it comes to lending.
Thank you.
What are the biggest challenges that buyers are having right now? What are you seeing as biggest challenges?
Biggest challenge is definitely affordability. It's a challenge, to afford a home. It's definitely the highest payments that we've seen in our lifetimes, right? You factor in rates that are as high as they've been in over 20 years. And then you have home prices that, while they have dipped some, are still not too far off of their highs, or in a lot of measures around the country are actually at new all-time highs, in a lot of markets. So, affordability is definitely a challenge. And that's just a mental hurdle that we have to help the clients get over. The one thing I always like to point out is that buying a home, first and foremost, is not an investment. It's a roof over your head, right? It's a place to live. It's somewhere where you're going to raise family and create memories and things like that. Now, it also happens to be a good long-term investment, right? We know that unequivocally. If you look back at statistics going back to World War II, homes appreciate on average at 4 to 5% a year. Like it is remarkably stable. I mean, it is unbelievably stable. Now, some years you go up 20%, COVID years, 2020, 21, it was 20% appreciation in our local market. And then some years you'll have a down year, in our market, 2022 was definitely a down year overall. 2023 is probably going to be somewhat flat, I believe, when we get to the end of the year, start to finish. But when you average that out over 5, 10, 15, 20 years, like you can bank on real estate going up by 4 to 5% a year. What a remarkable investment, that you can be assured of, will be there for you. So, you brought up interest rates. If rates were 5% tomorrow, we would see a spike in prices again. So, the buyer that is out there sitting on the sidelines, waiting for rates to drop, there is absolutely something good about that. No doubt about it. Prices, payments go down, affordability goes up, the amount you can buy goes up, but there are some negatives to it, right? If you catch it when it's too low, you're going to lose your negotiating power, right? You've been phenomenal this year at getting people, reduced prices. You've been getting them tons of seller credits, right? A lot of other negotiating things that you bring to the table as an agent for your buyers, right? Those things go away when there is an overwhelming demand, because the seller doesn't have to accept those terms in order to sell their house anymore. right? And you end up in multiple
Right.
offers and prices that are above listing price, at that point. So,
Mm-hmm.
so we need to be careful, right? If you're a buyer and you're thinking about when is the right time to buy, you need to be careful, right, with when that is. The rate's going too low. There are other people sitting on the sidelines just like you that will all come back into the market at the same time. And whatever price,
We
yeah,
saw that. We saw just that in February of
yes,
2023. Just that, all the buyers that were sitting
yep,
on the sidelines in the entry level
yep,
market, first time home buyers, they all had the same idea at the same time in February. I had 12 new construction properties between middle of January to the beginning of
mm-hmm,
March. 12 new construction
yep,
homes, which is for a quarter, that was a lot of new
it was,
construction for
yeah.
me. But they were all first time home buyers under contract with
Yeah,
new
and that
construction.
happened because we actually, in the midst of a pretty poor year for interest rates last year, we actually had a pretty sizable decline for about 3 months from November, December, and January. Rates decreased quite a
Mm-hmm.
bit, and then we got hit again and
Yeah.
started going up the wrong direction in February. But yeah, that interest rate decrease that you saw, that's a microcosm of exactly what we're talking about, right? This is not. This is a
Mm-hmm.
proven factual thing, right? When rates go down, demand goes up, and more people enter the market. And so, so when you buy a home, the one thing that you cannot change is the price that you paid for that house, right? You bought
Mm-hmm.
it, it's done. That is the price you paid forever and ever. But what you can change about a house is the interest rate that you have, right? You can refinance at any time in the future. Whether the rates are higher or lower, you can change that interest rate. And so there is definitely a very big argument that if you are ready to buy, you can qualify and you find a house that suits your needs and you can afford it, buy it now, even while the rates are higher. Buy it now,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can refinance in 1 or 2 or 3 years. We do believe the rates are going down. The market strongly believes that, without getting into all the stuff that's going on behind the scenes here in the mortgage world.
Yeah.
Firm belief rates are going down. Buy it now, refinance later. When you refinance, you do that with no competition. The price of your home is not going to change from 3 years ago when you bought it, but you
Mm-hmm.
get the opportunity to reduce your interest rate, save a bunch of money on your payments. So serious
Yeah.
thing. And then the other thing for a consumer to think about is, what if rates don't go down and you buy now? You actually might also feel good about
Mm-hmm.
your purchase now because you made the acquisition
Yeah.
and you got a lower rate than what was available, say, next year. This popped into my awareness this past summer. We like to follow up with our past clients. We like to check in and stuff. And so we like to
Mm-hmm.
check in at the 1 year mark and see how they're doing, how their finances are going, how their house is treating them. And what was funny was, we started 2022 with rates that were basically 3%, right? That was basically it, in January of 2022. Uh, Rates increased precipitously in the first 6 months of the year. It was the largest increase
Mm-hmm.
in interest rates over a short period of time like that. They went up basically 3%. They went from 3% to into the
Yeah.
sixes by middle of June. And so, people in the summer of 2022 were getting interest rates when we were closing that were mostly in the fives, some in the sixes. And at that point, those consumers, those home buyers, were not happy with that rate. Like that, they were not thrilled about it at that time, because 6 months earlier they were looking at
Mm-hmm.
3%. And what has been really
Yeah.
eye-opening,
Which was like 100-year generational
people need to
low.
understand that the rates that we had in 2020, so a little bit 2019, 2020, 2021 are not the norm. People need to, especially the
Yeah.
new millennials and all the new people entering the home buying market, like that's not what you should expect.
Sure.
There was a lot of reasons why those rates were that low, and they weren't good reasons, right? Like they shouldn't be that low.
Yeah.
But yeah, so as I followed up with the clients that purchased last summer, as I checked in with them this summer, what was really eye-opening for me is how happy they were that they pulled the trigger last summer with those 5.5, and 6%
Mm-hmm.
rates. And that's because if they had waited, it would have been 7.5, and 8% this summer and fall. And so
Yeah.
that to me was just a reminder that, like, if you're ready and you find a house that you love and you can afford it, pull the trigger, right? Like, don't wait for a rate. A rate can be changed in the future. And if it goes up, you're going to be disappointed that you didn't do it. Right. So, yeah.
Right.
So
Oh
just
yeah.
something for the consumer to keep in mind. It's really, again, we don't want anybody to do anything they're not comfortable with. But if you feel like you're ready and you feel like you can handle the payments, then pull the trigger. So, yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Going back to
Yeah.
affordability, being, one of the biggest challenges right now, obviously, that buyers are facing, my best advice that I'm giving my buyers right now is it's my job to come in and get you a good rate buy down, right? Let's focus on locking in the lowest price that we can, because prices have come down. So rule of thumb is buy as prices are coming down. But the flip side of the coin is let's get a seller paid rate buy down. And there's a multitude of ways to do that. Let's say a property is priced really well already. How do you know if a property is priced really, really well already? You don't fucking look at the Zillow Zestimate. That is not going to tell you if a property is priced well. We do not look at Zillow's estimates. There was already there have been several class action lawsuits against the Zillow's estimate. And I love Zillow. I have videos on my channel where I say how much I absolutely love Zillow. I've got a great relationship with Zillow, but I hate the Zestimate. Why? Because they are not in the business of appraising properties. It is an algorithm built by a tech geek. Okay. It's an algorithm built by a tech geek. And so it's not factoring in upgrades, improvements, the style or the quality of construction of the build. It's not factoring that stuff in. It's taking a data aggregate of just all the shit around the property. So buyers have got to stop. I'm going to have my editor make shorts out of don't use the Zestimate. We've got to get that information out there. So how do you know if a property is priced correctly to begin with? You link up with a great local broker who's been doing this for a long time, who understands the business. Every time I go out there, my buyers are looking at properties. I'm looking at, is this property priced 10% above where it should be? How far away are we from 2019's values? That's one thing that the conversation I'm really appreciating having with my buyers is let's try to get this property within spitting distance of 2019 right now, because if the market's going to bottom out, that might be a good number to look back at because we had stable, balanced growth from 15 to 19. So if we want to, let's look at the value of this property before all of the artificial manipulation, the political migration, and the super duper low interest rates. If we take those out of the equation, boop, we go back to 2019's prices. So if a property is already priced well, I tell my buyers that, hey guys, they price this property to sell. It's priced well. Do you like the home? Wonderful. Let's get a 3-2-1 or a 2-1 rate buy down. Let's try to really get that rate down to give you some runway to refinance when rates finally come down. So if the property's already priced well, if the seller doesn't want to dish out that extra money for the 3-2-1 rate buy down, then we just increase the purchase price ever so slightly to afford the seller the ability to cover your rate buy down so that he's pulling cash out of his equity to get your rate down. Now, explain, Mike, what a 3-2-1 and a 2-1 rate buy down.
Yeah, so this is a phenomenal product. It's been around for a very long time. We just didn't need to use it for the last 10 or 15 years up until the last probably 18 months. So great program. Some people call it a graduated rate mortgage or graduated payment mortgage. But basically those numbers, 3-2-1, stand for the amount of rate reduction and the year in which you're getting it. So a 3-2-1 would be 3% lower rate than what you would normally get for the first year. Then in the second year, it goes up by 1%. So it's 2% lower than you should have received. Third year, it's 1% lower. And then in the fourth year, you're back to your normal rate. So it's not the same as an adjustable mortgage. Some people ask that because it's, exactly when it's occurring, exactly what's happening, and you have an exact payment schedule that you will have the whole time. But it is something that will reduce your payments on a 3-2-1 buy down. If you have an average, let's say it's an roughly average price home here in our Boise, Idaho market, it could reduce your payments by over $1,000 a month that first year. And then you're probably $500 or $600 the second year and $200-300 the third year.
And your amortization, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, the amortization and the payment schedule is at the reduced rate each of those 3 years until the loan matures at the current market rate. So just to give people an example, in case that explanation was a little over the head. Let's say you get qualified today, current market rates are 7.5. So then if we get you a 3-2-1 rate buy down in your first year, you're amortized and paying at 4.5. Okay. Second year, you're paying at 5.5. Third year, you're paying at 6.5. And then the loan matures at the market rate 7.5. That gives you 4 years worth of runway to wait for rates to come down to then refinance the entire thing at a lower rate. So I'm telling buyers right now, stop worrying about rates. Somebody experienced like myself, and there are thousands of other agents out there that have the same level, if not more experience than I do, that can help you maneuver rates. Okay. We're savvy. We do this day in and day out. We know how to get around this for you. What I find is a lot of resistance, right? Because I take a lot of cold and inbound leads, and buyers have a lot of mistrust for real estate agents. Why? Because the barrier to entry is too damn low in our industry. And so over the last 3 years, you had a lot of clowns that got into the business that did not know their head from a hole in the wall and were giving buyers bad advice. So when that happens, buyers are like, why the hell do I need a real estate agent? You know? And so it's interesting trying to persuade people. I don't want to use the word convince, but persuade them to, be open-minded and say, hey, go on my Zillow profile, look at your agent's track record. How many reviews do they have? What do those reviews look like? How many current sales do they have? You can trust Zillow when you go on there to look at an agent's profile, because now agents' profiles are linked to their MLS feed. So, when we close a property, boom, it's updated on the MLS. I cannot in any way, shape, or form remove consumer reviews on my Zillow profile. No matter how much money I spend with Zillow, and I spend over $30,000 a month with them for advertising, I still have no sway with them to remove derogatory reviews. So Zillow is a great storefront for real estate agents, for consumers to go and shop their agent, get a good agent. Because right now, more than ever, you need strategy to navigate this market. I know that you would agree with
100%. Me on that. And an agent like yourself, the first thing you're going to do is figure out if that price is is priced well, right? Is it overpriced? Is it underpriced? There are strategies for some agents to purposefully underprice a home so that it generates a ton of buzz and interest and multiple offers.
Especially
and so some buyers need to understand that just because you might bid over the asking price, that does not mean that the home has become a bad deal in some way, right? If I want to sell my iPhone, for $200, there's probably gonna be a bunch of people that want to buy it, at that point. So, and so that's a strategy, right? That's one strategy. Some agents might go on the high side, and then they know they're just going to reduce the price, right? Once the offers come in. But going back to the 3-2-1 buy down, when you have a savvy agent such as yourself, and you realize that potential there, and you're a strong negotiator to get money from the seller, the thing about the 3-2-1, the 2-1, and the 1-0 buy downs is that what effectively happens on the loan side of things is we're just prepaying the interest. So there's not a real savings there. It's just a way to restructure it to make the payments more manageable for the buyers in those 3 years. So all that interest, in the 3-2-1 example, all that interest for the 3 years is just prepaid at closing time. Yeah.
Prepaid. But it impacts
it
their
does. Yep.
payment.
So that's what reduces the payment. And so for that reason, because it's just simply prepaid, it doesn't make sense for the buyer to do that themselves. Right. That would be like me sending in 20 grand to my credit card bill and saying, here, just cover me for the next 6 months. Right. That doesn't make financial sense. Keep my money and just pay the bill when it's due with that money. But if you can get somebody else like a seller, or in a lot of cases, a builder, to pay that for you, then it is a phenomenal benefit. Will make this payment feel much more manageable. It allows you to kind of grow into the higher payments as they change over the years. And then one of the best parts about it is that because you're prepaying interest, it is not a fee, right? It is different than a fee or a cost. It's a prepayment. So what's really cool is, let's say that rates do drop in 18 months and you've done a 3-2-1 buy down, and let's say you put $25,000 into that through a seller credit. The unused portion of that $25,000 credit actually comes back to you as a credit when you refinance. So that money is not lost. Gotcha. It goes against your principal balance at that point and becomes something that benefits you no matter how long you keep that loan. So really, really great tool.
Can you repeat that last part and explain the refinance and how that money comes back to them?
So let's say they did a $500,000 loan. They paid 25 grand for a 3-2-1 buy down in this example. and it's 18 months in, right? So on that, I mean, I'll be doing some quick sort of head math here, but
18
when they
months in when they
refinance, yep. So they've gone
refinance.
through their first year.
Copy.
The first year cost the most as far as the temporary buy down. So that was probably roughly 12,000 of the 25. And then you're 6 months into year two, so you've probably reduced another 3 or 4 thousand, or used another three or 4,000 of the prepaid interest. So we've got probably $9,000 to $10,000 left of prepaid interest. So when you come to
They can use that to
Yes,
refinance.
exactly. And so that's still
Yeah.
that same seller credit that your great real estate agent negotiated for you, helping you in the future. So let's say you got
Dude.
that 7.5 market rate. You paid 4.5 the first year, you paid the 5.5 the second year, you're in the middle of that. But now the permanent 30-year fixed rate has come down to 5%. Right. So now you feel like, okay, like
Yeah.
this might be the low point of this cycle, because I don't believe we're going back to twos
Yeah.
or threes. So like, okay,
I'd refinance if rates
yeah,
hit in the
and
fives.
make it permanent, right? That's the
Yeah.
thing, make it permanent. So you're saying, okay, I've got 5.5 this year. It's going to go up to 6.5 the year after that. It's going to go to 7.5 permanently, but rates are at 5.0. I'm going to take my chance right now. Well, when we look at that original $500,000 loan, they've probably in a year and a half, they've probably knocked off about 10 grand or so, 8 to 10 grand if they've been making minimum payments. Well, that 10 grand credit we have now that's left over from the seller credit, that can go towards the payoff of their current loan. So it just makes everything a little bit cheaper. So again, it's that credit that gets negotiated by a savvy agent, just continuing to work for you. It doesn't, it's not gone basically if you refinance quickly.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. It's well, I mean, that's how you do it. Money is already in the kitty if you haven't gone all the way out to the maturation date on a 3-2-1, which would be year 4, right? Or a 2-1 would be year 3, or a 1-0 would be the next year, year 2. If you refinance, you've got money in the kitty to, in theory, refinance and cover that expense. So that is how you navigate rates right now. Okay. Try to get those good buy downs. Do you have any other advice on, are there better programs or buy downs? Cause to me, that's what I'm seeing is kind of like,
the temporary buy downs are great. Yeah. I mean, those are fantastic, especially when we've got sellers that are willing to provide those credits right now, sellers and builders. Those are great. Yeah. We can still do permanent buy downs, right? That reduce your rate quite a bit less than a temporary buy down, but might not cost as much either. Those can be good. Another, going back to the temporary buy down too, you might have a buyer that's maybe they're moving into the area. They're on a short-term work contract. They're only going to be here 2 years. I'm like, oh man, like I don't want to spend all that money to do the temporary buy down. And then I'm just going to sell the house in 2 years. Well, that's the other great part about that seller credit being sort of refundable to you, right? It's a prorated rebate or refund of it. Is that if you do sell the house, that's just going to reduce the amount that you owe. So it's fantastic there. But with permanent buy downs, those can be great. And then, it really goes back to me as a loan officer. I want to have an in-depth conversation with our clients to find out what are their long and short-term goals. What do they want to accomplish? And because the answer is not the same for everybody. For a lot of people, a temporary buy down is great. Some people, a permanent buy down might be better. Some people might not want the uncertainty of that payment going up over time, and they just would rather have something that's a little bit more stable. Some people might know the house is going to be very short term, and maybe it makes sense to not do any type of buy down, and we instead focus on price or some other avenue that the agent can help with in negotiating. So it really is a case-by-case situation, and it's something that we work very hard with our clients here to navigate the right choices for their situation.
Yeah. What is on a permanent rate buy down, Mike? What is explain to me how that works with where's the threshold on the maximum amount that we can buy the rate down permanently? Because you can't buy it down to zero.
You can't. So there are government rules on how much we can charge there. And so it will vary based on their individual loan situation. Unfortunately, so there's not a hard and fast answer to that. Roughly, though, in at least in our local Idaho market here, we can typically spend somewhere between 3 and 4 points in a buy down before we will hit those government thresholds to say, hey, you can't charge that much anymore. So so it's about 3 to 4 points. Okay. That's 3 to 4 points in cost, which will generally reduce an interest rate somewhere, I would say, between 1 and 2 points from a rate with no cost.
So the takeaway from this is, biggest challenge on affordability is trying to, find some strategic ways. And again, consult with your trusted broker. I don't even want to say agent anymore in this market. Go to a broker, find a broker. unless that real estate agent has 15 plus years experience, they have worked through a down cycle and they've got a hell of a lot of transactions underneath their belt. But consult with your local quality broker agent and find a really good loan officer who understands, who is intelligent and understands how to navigate the lending system. Because there's a lot of loan officers, just like there's a lot of real estate agents. And frankly, I will say it, I don't care how much hate or flack I get from it. The majority suck. Find the 5% that are excellent at what they do. And then you will be set up for success in your local market, trying to purchase or sell, right? Because now you've got good professionals giving you quality counsel. People will always be transacting, right? It doesn't matter whether the market's up or down. There will always be homes listed. There will always be buyers buying. So it's about making the right decisions.
And with choosing a realtor too, one of the mistakes that we see a lot of people make is, we're talking to them about their financing. Hey, do you have a real estate agent? Oh yeah, my cousin Mary does real estate, and great, like.
That's my face when I hear that.
Mary might be excellent, but we do ask questions at that point. Okay, so is Mary like a full-time real estate agent? Is she doing this all the time? Is this her profession? Or does she do 1 or 2 transactions a year when family needs it? And really she's a florist, or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Like that is, you are set up to just miss out on great representation and some of the benefits that an agent brings, and just not get the full benefit out of the market, and where some of these credits and negotiating skills and things like that come into play. So so the family real estate agent, if they're not a true professional, can be something I would have you strongly think about as a consumer. So, and going back to the finances too, a lot of times what we're looking at with clients it's not always necessarily about the loan either, right? It might not be necessarily the buy down and the loan. There could be a lot more going into that, right? Because we really do get to see a lot about the home buyer's situation, right? We're looking at their debts. We're looking at their income. We can see how old their kids are. We can see what kind of assets they have in the bank. We get to talk to them about their long and short-term goals. We know their age, so we know how close they might be to retirement. And it really is an overall encompassing financial picture, right? There are times where we might advise certain things based on what your stated goals are, how long you want to be in a home, where you feel financially comfortable. And so it is, we really become almost a financial advisor for the client, because we want them to just have a successful run with home ownership. We want them to grow their net worth. And we really want to generate a long-term relationship for many, many years. And so we're going to try to provide advice and guidance on what we see might be the best thing for them. And oftentimes it might be, hey, let's put less money down on the house, but let's pay off a few of these debts. Or, let's think about, hey, you're going to be retiring in 3 more years. Let's kind of think about that and how that goes into this. Or maybe it's an older couple and it's, hey, have you thought about if somebody passes away? What's going to be the outcome for the remaining spouse, at that time. So there really is a lot. And we love to, that's one of my favorite parts of the job actually, is going through that strategy and really trying to navigate the best financial outcome for people. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and you're exceptional at it. Again, this is why I send my buyers to you, and I can't, stress this to buyers enough. Why this leads me into pre-qualifications, right? When I meet a buyer, you are the linchpin, Mike, that gets everything moving. It's, people don't understand that it's like, I, as a real estate broker, I need you to get that pre-qualification done. Not because I don't mind showing you houses. I can't tell you how many houses I show. Even after being in the business almost a decade, I can't tell you how many houses I still show to buyers who aren't pre-qualified. I have no freaking clue if you can afford this house. But as a courtesy and a service to you, I am more than happy to meet you at a property, right? Because I'm the gatekeeper. I've got the keys to the property and you're thinking about buying. I'm happy to start a conversation with you at the property. And I think a lot of buyers, they think that we're trying to cajole them into getting a pre-qual because we don't want to like waste our time if they can't afford the house. That's simply not the case. I believe that you can afford something, but ultimately I need you in my lender's hands. So that for me as an agent, that is my mode of operandi. It's to get the buyer at the first point of contact unless you're cash, of course, into my lender's hands, because I want to know that you're getting quality lending advice. And my advice is somewhat limited because I'm not a lender. I see what works for my buyers and I see what tools are in Mike's toolbox, so I can tell you what you could potentially deploy. But Mike is the expert. Your lender's the expert when it comes to actually opening up your file and giving you the best advice possible on your purchasing power. Buyers need to understand their purchasing power. And so that pre-qualification, it's a fantastic process to go through. And I think, Mike, that there's a lot of resistance and misperception around the pre-qualification because buyers think, oh, well, I'm not ready to buy right now. Why would I do that? Why would they do that, Mike, when they're not ready to buy right now?
So many benefits to it. So number one, it's free, right? It doesn't cost them a dime. When my team and I go through that, we're not making a penny, right? This is just to help them be more prepared. Number two, it does come with no obligation, right? Just because you've gone through that financial process does not mean you now have to go buy a home in the next 2 months. There is no expiration date on it. We may need to update it at some point in the future for sure, but
you said 4 months, I believe, right? Like technically,
the credit report for us, and it could be different for different lenders. Ours is good for 120 days, so 4 months. But there's no obligation to run out and immediately buy a home. But it arms you with so much information. Number one, are you qualified? Number two, how high are you qualified? What is the maximum? Number three, what are the parameters that go along with that qualification? There might be certain minimum down payments you can expect. There are going to be closing costs you can expect. There might be other contingencies in there, like something related to your job or to a certain amount of savings or to sometimes to some marital situations with divorces or marriages or things of that nature, right? There's a lot of things that might be important for you to know that have to be in place before you can close on the house. You're going to understand, you're going to understand the numbers. So when you're buying a house at $400,000 and you're putting 5% down, that means my payments are going to be X. And if I put down 10%, they'll be Y. If I go up to a $500,000 house, now my payments are Z, right? And you need that information as a consumer in order to confidently home shop with a great agent. Because otherwise you really don't know, all right, I'm walking into this house, it's $450,000. I think I'm going to put $25,000 down. But what does that mean payment wise, right? And you don't know as a consumer, right?
I used a mortgage calculator online. Mike.
The very accurate online calculators. Yeah, do not do that. So, and we talked about Zillow and not using the Zestimate. Yeah, don't use the online calculators.
No Zillow Zestimate. No mortgage calculators.
Come to a professional for that. But we can arm you with that information, and if anything, it helps you narrow down your focus and say, all right, you know what? Just based on that information, I now know I really don't feel comfortable with a $500,000 house with 5% down. It really has to be a $425,000 house, and I think I'll put 10% down because that's where my comfort level is.
Yeah.
Right. And then we get you out there shopping with that information so you feel really confident. And now you can focus on bedrooms and bathrooms and all the fun stuff and what color are the kitchen cabinets and is the yard big enough, and not, oh my gosh, can I really do this in this house? Right. And you don't want to be, as a consumer, you don't want to be shopping at a home price that's either too high or too low. Right? If you're shopping too low, I think there's obvious things there, right? You could just get a better house, something that's going to suit you better, fit your family better, be in a better location, better schools, less traffic, less crime. But by the same token, if you're shopping at a home price that's too high, now you might feel financially uncomfortable, right? When you finally close on that house, you might get some sticker shock, and there might be some real stress and anxiety there if you actually buy the house. The other thing too is if you're shopping and you haven't gone through a pre-approval, maybe you take somebody out and they look at a number of $500,000 homes, and then we get back to them and we look and we go, gosh, you know what? I'm sorry, Joe, your max is really going to be about $400,000. Well, now when they go and look at those $400,000 homes, they're all going to seem very inferior to what they were looking at before, right? Just that expectation. I don't know about you, but when I go see a movie, if my expectations are high, it almost never meets the expectations. It could be the best movie in the world, and I come out going,
That's how the last, I'm going to be controversial here. That's the last couple of Marvel movies for me. After Endgame, dude, the
Yeah.
bar was so high after Endgame.
Exactly. So
So
for me, when I see a movie, a lot of times I almost don't even want to know anything about it because my expectations are low. I'm not thinking much, and it could be not even that great of a movie. I could come out and go, hey, I had a good time, right? It was good. It was good. But if the expectations are really high, it could be a great movie. And the first time I see it, I might be like, I'm not sure what to think. Like I really was hoping for more, that kind of thing. And that's what we don't want for you as a home shopper, right? We'd like you to be really zeroed in on what's appropriate. And then one other really, really important aspect about a pre-approval is that, if you find that home that you love and you want to make a really fast offer and beat anybody else in the market, you got to be ready, right? And a pre-approval, if we're lucky, if it's a really super simple situation, we can do it in a matter of a few hours. But in reality, if we're going to put the due diligence in and make sure that we've done a good job so that there aren't headaches and stresses later on, it might take a few days, especially in our post-COVID world where we've got a few different underwriting issues. So you want to be ready, right? You want to be ready to make that offer, make a strong offer. And the sellers are looking for guidance from the lender on how strong that buyer is. I can't tell you how many listing agents I talk to every single week. And I say, hey, I've got a really great buyer here. And I'm taking you as a consumer and I'm selling the listing agent on why they should accept your offer because they've got a cash offer or they've got two or three others. And and so we need to be ready with that information. And if I've never talked to you, right, and it's a Sunday afternoon and you're filling out an application and that listing agent calls me on Monday morning, like what am I going to say? I can't present the same confidence as when there's somebody that I've had pre-approved for a few weeks, maybe even a couple months. And I say, oh man, these guys are awesome, super stable job. Been there for a few years. Income's great. They've got the assets. Like this is going to be a slam dunk. We're going to take care of you, Mr. Listing Agent, and your sellers, right? Like we put that kind of effort into the offer, right? Because it is competitive still out there. So those are a few reasons why that pre-approval is just paramount. And I highly encourage everybody, do it a little bit ahead of time. Don't wait until you're ready to home shop. There's no harm in doing it. One additional thing is, let's say you're not approved, right? Because not everybody is, right? There are some people we have to give them, we don't like to say no. We like to say not yet. So we might give them a little bit disappointing news. Maybe they're not approved or they're not approved for enough. They wanted 500, but we can only pull off 325 for whatever the reason is. The other benefit of the pre-approval is we can tell you why. We can tell you why that is the case.
We had a buyer like that. We've had buyers like that together.
And we'll give you the guidance and the feedback and say, hey, I need you to work on A, B, and C. D, E, and F are great. They're fantastic. Don't worry about those. But A, B, and C, let's focus on those. Let's put in some effort on those over the next few weeks. Maybe it's a few months. Maybe it's a year or two. But if you're a consumer, you're not going to know the reason why you're not approved. Right? There are a lot of different reasons. It could be credit. It could be income. It could be debts. It could be a lack of savings.
Well, and even totally. And even on the credit, Mike, just to extrapolate from the credit situation, like I see a lot of the times buyers are like, I need to pay off all of my credit card debt. And it's like, no, because your score will go down if you do that. There is some debt that you do need to carry. And so when I link my buyers up with you, it's because I want to make sure that they're not making a mistake that disqualifies them, and they're not going to go do something stupid or short-sighted with their capital, right? So I know that if I send them to you, you're going to say, hey, let's pay off this debt, not that debt. And buyers don't know those things. And so they operate with, like this half-baked concept of what credit debt is, right? Let's just pay it all off. And then it's like, oh shit, your score actually took a hit. Or maybe we don't pay off the credit card debt and Mike thinks that it's better to pay off the vehicle to free up some monthly so that your DTI score improves. So this is why the pre-qual is so important. Like there's some buyers, man, they're just, there's like an arrogance, like they think they know everything. And it's like, you don't. And it's short-sighted what you're thinking. And you're not a professional loan officer. You're not a professional real estate broker. And so, rather than have a grudge against the industries and think that, because you've met some bad ones, think that we don't know what we're talking about, how about you do the research on finding the right broker and the right loan officer to give you counsel, right? It's like if I have to go into court, I'm not going to hire an attorney that one is brand spanking new, like I want to go in there and get a fighter with a track record of being a fighter. And you got to do your research on the professionals that you consult with.
And and on your attorney analogy too, right? At least as far as lenders go, if you're looking for an attorney and let's say you've been accused of murder, well, you're not going to go get an attorney who handles drunk driving cases, right? Like that's not good for you. So same thing with lenders. If you're shopping in the Boise, Idaho market, you do not want to be with Rocket Mortgage, right? A national lender. You don't want to be with places that aren't here local, right? There's local knowledge. There's local things that we can bring to the table.
Local grants and programs. So, like Idaho housing grants. And, and these guys don't stay dialed into each one of the regions that they have a freaking license in.
Veterans, it's particularly important with veterans as well, because there's some of the name brands out there. You've got your Navy Federal and USAA and Veterans United and some of these places. And while they do some great things, my wife is a veteran, full disclosure. My wife served 9 years in the Air Force. I love VA. I love the benefits are amazing.
Well, we're a veteran brokerage.
Yep, you're a veteran brokerage as well. So, while those places are great, I have USAA car insurance. They're not here locally as far as a loan officer goes. And there are impacts that can happen here locally that are very important to know. So you want to pick not only the right professional and have to guide you, but
and Mike, they're more expensive.
Yeah, they can be as well. So, yeah.
That I've had a lot of buyers that they were adamant that they wanted to start their pre-qual at the USAA level, which I never, if you want to start your pre-qual, start it wherever the hell you'd like to, because I always encourage buyers to shop. I always encourage that. And you should shop if you're a savvy consumer, but I can't tell you how many times I've brought buyers to you and, your closing estimate was better than the USAA closing estimate or the Veterans United estimate. And so that's, people just, it's always, that's what I have to deal with on a daily basis. Yes, I do marketing. I do marketing to acquire you as a client. But at the end of the day, I'm never a salesman. I'm not selling you on anything. Yeah. I'm an educator. I am here to educate you.
I provide education and expertise and experience, and you do such a great job at that. You brought up a couple of good points too. If you're a consumer and you're thinking about buying a home, or if it's something that you want to do in the next 1 to 2 years, and you think to yourself, you know what, I feel like I'm not ready. I need to work on a few things. Really, what you should do at that point is talk to a lender, right? Even if you're a year or two away, that is okay. We do not mind. You're not wasting our time. We have the same goal as you, and that's to help you buy a home when you are ready, right? So we want to put you in that position.
Yeah. Ooh. Yes, I'm gonna have Jay, the editor. I want him to put up our review of our client, Cassie and Tyler, on my Zillow profile, because they said they were with us for 3 years preparing to buy. This is about huddle your team together, find your team, even if you're not looking to buy right now. And I think that's the biggest, that's kind of the biggest thing that needs to change in real estate consumerism. The consumer mentality is, I'll find the agent when I'm ready to go look at the house. If you are not already connected with a quality agent, and like you said, kind of in the near distant future, 2 to 3 years, you're going to go and you're trying to game plan, right? Because 3 years sneaks up on all of us like that. Go get your team together. Just to piggyback off what you said, I mean, that's how a good agent and lending team should operate. I'm not trying to overhype what you and I do, but I do pat us both on the back because we're an excellent team. We're a 1-2 punch, and there's a lot of lenders and brokers out there that have established rapport with each other, and birds of a feather flock together. I'm not going to work with a loan officer who's brand new because I don't have the patience for it, because I know that he has blinders on. There are things that she is not seeing.
Absolutely. You mentioned credit. Somebody might be working on credit, but credit, unfortunately, is just not a common sense game these days, right? You mentioned just paying everything off. Well, that may or may not be good, right?
It's not a common
that may or may not be good.
Right.
A classic example is getting rid of all your credit cards, right? Believe it or not, for the best credit scores, you actually want to have 1 or 2 credit cards in your name. They just need to be used correctly. They need to be used appropriately. Another classic mistake that a consumer makes is like, oh man, I went through a rough patch. I had a few collections and things on my credit report. I'm just going to get them all paid off and settled. And on the surface, like that sounds like common sense would say, yeah, you know what, that's probably a good thing, right? If you have a collection that
Yeah.
has a $400 balance, if you pay that off, that should be better for your credit, but that is actually not the way the credit report works. And if you don't do the proper planning on paying that off, there are ways to have that benefit you. There are actually ways to have that set your score back by paying it off. We can provide some of that guidance and some of those answers on how that works. Another one would be, hey, I've got $40,000 saved up. Is this better for me as a down payment? Is it better for me to pay off some of my debt? Which debt should I pay off? Those are exactly the questions that we can answer for you once we've had a good, clear look at your financial picture. I will tell you that answer is different for everybody. There might be some people where we say, hey, you know what, your income and your debts is really actually fantastic, and we want to save that money to use it towards a house, down payments, costs. There could be other people where it's the exact opposite. Like, hey, I can find down payment money for you. I can find some of these local great programs. We can utilize those. But in order to get the house you want, we need less debt. We really need that money to be put to good use towards debts. And then on top of that, we should pay off these 3 debts, but not these other 2, like you mentioned earlier. Right? These are all the things that we do for you as a consumer. And again, no cost to this, no obligation to it. Our goal is to help you accomplish your objectives in both home buying, real estate, and just overall finances. And we're going to put our best advice forward to help you accomplish those things.
So last note on, again, why it's really important for, consumers to find a lender, especially if you are self-employed. I've seen a lot of self-employed clients of mine who were forced to be renters for a period of time because they took too many deductions and too many write-offs and then weren't thinking ahead. And they just thought, oh, I make good income. Look at my bank statements. Look how much money I bring in as an LLC or a sole proprietor. And but then they wrote too much off. So on their taxes, unfortunately, you don't qualify for the kind of house that you want to buy. We had a client 2 years ago that was basically stuck to be a renter for a 2-year period. Instead of being able to buy a property before all of the prices shot up, they were stuck renting. And had they just connected with you 6 months prior, in the year prior, right, and said, hey, this is the income that we're going to need, try not to write off all of these things or take too many deductions so that your income is sufficient to purchase X price. So so self-employed individuals really need to, again, it's imperative that you guys, again, find a good loan officer. Find a qualified loan officer. Do not be shy or hesitant to ask somebody, what does your production look like? How many loans do you close? Same thing with the real estate agent. How many deals per year do you close? How long have you been in the business? And do your research. And then once you know that you're with somebody quality, then you can be at ease and just lean into the counsel and the advice and know that you're getting the right counsel.
Yeah, absolutely. So to build on your self-employed point, so to give the home buyer who might be watching this a little insight, or even agents, into how it works here. So your income and your debts are the primary drivers on how much you qualify for. There's a few other things, credit scores and down payments and things, but for the most part, the amount you're qualified for is based on your income compared to your debts. So for most people that are wage earners, right, they're earning regular incomes, their hourly, their salary, those types of things. Their income can really fluctuate and change throughout the year, right? If they get a raise, they qualify for more. If they start working less hours, they qualify for less. If they go, add some debt, they qualify for less. If they get rid of debt, they qualify for more. We get the idea there. But, with the income piece, for most people, it's in a constant state where we're able to look at it, update it, review it frequently. Basically, every time you get a pay stub, it has the potential to change. Self-employed is very different. Self-employed is basically set one time per year, and that is when you file your taxes. And you are now stuck with that income level until the next year when you file another tax return. And so with self-employed, it can be very important to do some pre-planning if you feel like you have real estate or even other financial goals, to make sure that you're going to structure and set up that tax return in a way that helps you for that coming year. And so one of the big things that we do, particularly in the January through April timeframe, but even really all the way through October, because a lot of people file extensions, is we just help people review their tax returns. We give them feedback on what that looks like right now and what it's going to qualify for them for over that next year. And then they can decide if that's sufficient or if they want to make changes to that. So just to be clear, we do not give tax advice.
Right.
All right. We do not tell people how to file their taxes
No.
or anything like that. But we can say, all right, based on the draft that you've given
Here's
me,
what you qualify for.
this is the income we calculate, and here's the level of house that you can buy right now. And if they look at that and go, awesome, like that's exactly what I need, then file the return and we're going to be good for a year. But if they look at that and go, man, like I really want to qualify for something more, I needed another 100,000. Well, then it's their choice, that to maybe decide to remove write-offs. Right. That is perfectly, there's nothing illegal about that. They can do that if they want to.
The government would love to get more money out of you.
Yeah, they will take that. There's a downside to that, right? Yeah, you're going to pay more taxes. But it is purely their choice. But it's an important step, because once you've filed, it becomes very hard to take that back and change that filing and do it in a way that's going to qualify for financial products. So we love to provide that service and just give people, again, just that. Essentially, it's just amounts to feedback, so they can decide if it's the way that they want to do it or not.
Right. Yeah. Mike, where do you think mortgage rates are going? What is the squawk on the street?
Yeah. So great question, especially at this point in time. We're in early November 2023. We just had what I would say is probably our best week of the year as far as interest rates go. We had a really fantastic reduction in rates this week. I think there's a lot of cautious optimism that they are beginning their trend downward. Hopefully, we will look back months or years from now and say, hey, October of 2023 turned out to be the peak of this cycle. That would be ideal. We're hopeful that they're going to go down. The Federal Reserve has started to show cracks in their policies and started to show they actually might be paying attention to data and to what's actually going on in the economy, indicating that they may stop raising. And there actually could be rate reductions at some point next year. Like, that's a possibility. But we believe that rates will probably begin a trickle downward over the course of 2024. Currently, as we sit today, we're probably right in the mid sevens as a national average as an industry. Yeah. There's some loans that are lower, some that are higher, but mid sevens is a good kind of estimate at the moment. I would love it if we could end 2024 in maybe the low to mid sixes. Like that would be very good. That'd be a nice change. And strangely enough, we actually don't want it to go too low too fast, because it can create a frenzy and some things that we've already talked about. It can create some negative side effects in the market. I know that'll sound weird to everybody that wants to buy a home. They're like, hey, I want a lower rate.
No,
but there
very
is
simple.
Some competitive disadvantages.
It's simple, Mike. It'll cause a lot of competition to purchase, and we're going to see prices go way back up. And we don't have the incomes in this country to substantiate another 15 to 20% spike, because interest rates barrel down and now everybody wants to go purchase again.
Yeah, exactly. So we need it to go down, but we need it to go down at a slow, measured pace. And so there's optimism that might be beginning now.
Yep. So in layman's terms, right, how are mortgage payments calculated? Because we said at the beginning of our interview, right, we're like, let's not look at Zillow's estimates. Let's not use online mortgage calculators. What can a buyer listening to today kind of, how can you open their eyes to a more simple way to understanding that formula?
Yeah. So at the end of the day, mortgage payment is really just some math. It's some weird, complicated math you can't do on a regular calculator. But basically, we're going to take a loan amount. There's a formula that goes in with an interest rate that comes up with what's called a principal and interest payment. When we say you have a fixed mortgage, that is the piece that we're talking about. Right? If you get a 30-year fixed mortgage, the principal and interest part of your payment will not change by even 1 penny over the course of that loan term. And then to complete the mortgage payment, we're going to add in 3 or potentially 4 other things. Home insurance will always be required. That is something the consumer goes out and looks for on their own. We'll provide some good resources to help them do that, but they're gonna ultimately pick that on their own. We will also add in property taxes generally to the payment. That, as we know, none of us have control over that. That is what it is. and that will be based on the property. That is an important part of having a good agent as well, is that we can look up the property taxes on properties as you're thinking about buying them, right? Because they are not the same. You could have two properties on the same street. They have very similar prices, and for reasons that are in the background, they may have different property tax levels. So that gets added in. There's another thing called mortgage insurance, which is for us on the lending side. That applies if you're putting down less than 20% in most loans and most scenarios. So if you do not do a 20% down payment, very often you'll have mortgage insurance. There are strategies that we can use on that as well. There are ways for us to help reduce that. Sometimes we can prepay it. So there's a lot of different things we can do there, but that would be added to your mortgage payment. And then the final thing that can come up in some cases, not a lot here in Idaho, is flood insurance. So that will happen for people around the country. Luckily, only a little bit here, because flood insurance can be pretty pricey in some cases. So we take all those things, and that becomes your total mortgage payment that you have.
And just to clarify, when you say loan amount, for folks listening, maybe first-time home buyers, your loan amount is not the purchase price. It could be if you're doing zero down, but let's say you want to buy a $350,000 home and you've got $50,000 to put down. Your loan amount is $300,000. So always subtract your principal, what you put on principal, which is the down payment, and then that would be your loan amount. So Mike, when you see bad credit files, right? What do you find as, optimal advice, and what do you usually do? How do people navigate, not having optimal credit? What is your best advice if somebody listening to this right now, doesn't have good credit? And then tell me what those numbers are, right? For FHA, conventional, VA, kind of go over credit score structure with me.
Yeah. So the first thing I want to point out is that you do not need to have perfect credit in order to qualify and buy a home these days. That is probably the number one misperception that we hear from a lot of home buyers. Yeah. Hey, my credit's not great. And that can mean so many different things to different people, right? That might truly mean you have pretty poor credit, how we would look at it. It also might mean you have a score in the mid 600s and it's not that mythical 800 credit score. Guess what? We can qualify a lot of people with a mid 600s credit score. So, if it does turn out you have lower credit, we're going to still try to qualify you if we can. We're going to try to find options and programs that will meet your needs now. But we're also going to try to provide that feedback, advice, and guidance onto how you improve that credit score. As we mentioned earlier, unfortunately, it's not common sense, and there's a lot of nuance that goes into that. The credit scores that we can work with. So this is speaking for myself and my company, Movement Mortgage. And I am happy to say that we tend to be some of the most aggressive in the industry and the most forgiving in the industry. So we do allow a very wide box of people to qualify. So for conventional loans, it typically is going to be a 620 score or higher. For FHA loans, it goes down to a minimum credit score of 500.
What?
That's 500. Just for those that are watching, that is a very low credit score.
That's really low.
You almost have to work at it to get it that low. So that's a very low credit score. VA will typically allow you to go down to 580. And then USDA, which is a little bit lesser used loan, will be in the 620, 640 range for a USDA loan. So
explain what a USDA loan is.
USDA is the slang we use for that is called a rural housing loan. That basically it's a great form of financing, but the property does have to be located in what's called a rural housing area. And so that means an area that doesn't have a lot of population. Right. For those watching in our local area, that basically means no Boise, no Eagle, no Meridian, no Nampa, no Caldwell. Just about everything else outside of that does end up qualifying.
Melba, Middleton.
Cases. Yeah,
Marsing,
CUNA typically works. Yeah. Yeah. And that loan allows you to do no down payment. It's a great product. It's not used as often just because those are a lot less populous areas, but it is fantastic. So, as you can see, there's a wide range of credit scores, and don't let that be something that holds you back. You might be higher than you think on credit. You might be able to still qualify now and begin that wealth building journey of home ownership. Yeah. And if you can't, we'll help you understand what you need to do to work on it.
Totally. I tell my buyers that all the time. I'm like, don't go and pay. What are those like Lexington Law? Don't go and pay those credit card places that are going to help you, improve your score. It's like legitimately find a great loan officer, because they get paid when they put you into a home. They want
Yeah.
you to get qualified, and so they're going to look at your credit
Mm-hmm.
file and give you great advice on because you can do credit simulators, right, Mike?
Mm-hmm.
Credit
Yep.
simulators.
Yep.
They
We
can
have them.
manipulate your debts and say, hey, let's place a priority on this. It may take us 6
Mm-hmm.
to 9 months, but they will give you a strategy. And it's not Lexington law. You don't have to pay for this advice. That's the beautiful part of, again, the pre-qual
Yes.
process. It's funny, I didn't
Yes.
expect to stay this long on the pre-qual conversation, but it's so important because, again, why are we having this conversation? It's to educate buyers and consumers who are still very much in the dark. And that is what the pre-qual process is for. It's so that you can get that hands-on specific education. So for anybody about to leave comments, right? If you're about to leave a comment underneath this video, this interview, with questions, that's a sign that you need to go and get a good team, right? Because your team should be, you should be on text basis with your team. You should be, hey, Mike Linder, hey, John Linder, what's the deal with my situation? Help me out here. When should I be prepared? Or I want to buy in 6 months. What do I need to start doing today to make sure that I'm ready? Like, get your team, saddle up with them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. There really isn't any harm in doing it now. Some people don't want to go through the hassle, right? I have to gather all these documents, but you're going to have to do it at
eventually.
some point anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And once you're under contract, you've added the stress of a deadline, right?
Yeah.
It's typically 30 days or less. And so we can knock out a lot of that part ahead of time and just make it easy and reduce that stress and anxiety.
I'll tell you a funny story about a terrible experience that I had with a lender. This was in my early days before I had started working with you. And which is why it, suddenly became very apparent to me that I need to have a better closing team, to surround myself with. But I had buyers that with a family of 4 moving out of Indiana back to Idaho. And the morning of closing, okay, the husband, who has been a repeat client of mine for Simplot, he had moved in and out of Idaho. He was in Indiana. Thank God we had that relationship, right? Because if this was a brand new buyer to me, he would have probably been equally as frustrated and stressed out with me, just projecting, right? Because I'm a part of the experience. But this lender had him pulling over in a U-Haul with 4 screaming children, pulling over in another state where he finally had reception to pay off a Home Depot credit card the morning of closing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how are we here today? And so this guy calls me. I'm at Walgreens and he is screaming up. I literally had to hold the phone away from my ear this much because you could hear him. He was screaming at the situation, right? But like these dumpster fires can happen when again you're working with amateurs. So and the amateurs are super frustrating. Any broker or lender that's been in the business, for 10 plus years and does a lot of volume like we do, they're shaking their head agreeing. They're like, yes, you would think that this is all common sense. But to this day, and I would think it would be common sense too. I can't tell you how many buyers I connect with on a daily basis on Zillow that have they may be talking with a real estate agent. They have no clue how experienced their agent is. Well, great. Are you pre-qualified? Yeah. Well, how long has your loan officer been doing loans? I don't know. Yeah. Well, holy shit. Those are some great questions to be asking.
Well, another thing too is if you've been through a pre-approval, I mean, first off, great for taking that initiative. But if it was 15 minutes online, 20 minutes at a bank teller desk, something like that is not sufficient. That is not a pre-approval. That you are just set up for failure and for stress and anxiety later on when they actually have to dig in. Because we all underwrite and do things for the most part. It's about 95% the same on those things. So you got to have somebody that's going to do the due diligence and make sure they give you a clear financial strategy and contingencies ahead of time. So that 15-minute, the Rocket Mortgage push button, get mortgage, like that is not how it works. That is not how it works. And you're doing yourself a disservice by going through that process early on. Yeah.
Well, and it just goes back to, again, it's when, and I've had buyers that vehemently wanted to stay with their lender. Oh, I'll give you this feedback. So again, this is going through consumers' minds too. I had some
Mhm.
clients that closed, and they told me, because I had them swap to a different lender, right? But they were
Mhm.
originally hell bent on using their first lender, and they ended up saving thousands and thousands of dollars by swapping in their closing costs alone. And they told me, thank you so much for being persistent and
Mm.
encouraging and influencing us to do this, because at first we didn't trust that you kept pushing your lender so hard, because we thought maybe there was a kickback, or there was,
Yeah.
like, we just didn't trust why you were being so adamant. And it's like,
Yeah.
listen, I'm adamant because I do a lot of business, because I want things to work smoothly for you and for me. So I want to
Mhm.
know that you're connected with somebody who's qualified, who's not going to be, extorting you on fees. I mean, there's definitely
Mhm.
like Neiman Marcus of lenders, and then there's like, the Walmarts of
Yeah.
lenders. I mean, people don't understand that closing costs absolutely do vary. And it's not
Yeah.
that you always want to go, again, you don't always want to go with the cheapest, because again,
No,
this goes back to
I would
being a
agree.
rookie. I've had buyers that,
Mhm.
their paperwork, they're constantly going back and forth between the underwriters. And I'm like, you should
Mhm.
not have whiplash from going back and forth to the underwriters. That
Yeah.
tells me that your loan officer doesn't know what the hell they're doing. And they're literally just
Yeah.
taking everything that you give them and throwing it on the underwriters. And the underwriters are coming back at them. And they're just like this ridiculous
Yep.
middleman who isn't worth the check that their name's going to be written on when this thing closes.
Sure. Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, cheapest is not always best, right? We as consumers, we don't always just buy the cheapest thing, right? It's
No,
not the cheapest TV, it's not the
no.
cheapest hotel room when we travel. So yeah, no, in fact, I would argue cheaper, there's probably some real danger in what you're going to get out of a
Yeah.
very important financial transaction. And that U-Haul example that you brought up, that person probably would
Oh, he
have
was
loved
livid.
to have paid a little bit more to make sure that they didn't have to deal with screaming kids in a U-Haul pulling over in the middle of a road trip that's already stressful. So yeah, and one other thing too for the sellers in our market, and maybe some markets are different, but our local Idaho market is definitely this way. The sellers are going to look at and compare the lenders of multiple offers, right? And so if they're seeing big bank, national company, non-local lender, and then they see Mike, Movement Mortgage, they've worked with me before.
Mhm.
They trust and can communicate with me. Like, you could be making the same offer and have a leg up
They will go
by
with,
having the right
yep.
lender and team.
I
And that
have
also
I have
goes for a
had
good local agent as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Back when there was all this competition the last 3 years, when if you're in a multiple offer situation, I have literally had I have had offers rejected, or we lost out on the deal because I had a
Mm-hmm.
stubborn mule buyer who they were like, no,
Yep.
I'm sticking with Rocket Mortgage. And I said, when I
Yep.
present this pre-qual letter, understand that I'm working with an experienced agent on the other side of this deal. They know that there's a plethora of problems with some of these online lenders, because you could have submitted X, Y, and Z on your application, but when it's time to submit the damn paperwork, your paperwork doesn't line up with your stated income. And so
Yeah.
there are reasons why we ask you to do the things that we ask you to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
for your own best
Absolutely. Yeah.
interest.
Banks, credit unions, Rocket, the big
Yeah.
national companies, all those places, like in our market, if it's an equal offer, there's going to be a downgrade for that. Even in some cases, when you've made a superior offer, you could have a downgrade for that. I'm sure you've had offers that where you thought, I'm not going to deal with this lending mess. I'm not going to put my sellers through this
Well, I'll tell
to see what we
my
get.
sellers always make
Yeah.
the decision, but my sellers
Yeah.
really rely on me to counsel them on
Yes.
the road ahead. So it's,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, you guys, with sometimes with VA loans, this is why, squawk on the street is that, a conventional is preferable over a VA, only because, VA goes through a separate an ancillary inspection process, that
Hmm.
sometimes can throw a monkey wrench into negotiations. VA appraisers are notorious for being ultra conservative on their valuations.
Hmm.
When prices were climbing, over the last 3 years, listing agents were counseling their sellers, hey, we're at higher risk here of having an appraisal gap, an appraisal shortage, right? Somebody's
Yeah.
offering us 710, we're priced at 670, but we've got a conventional loan coming in at 700. we may forego that $10,000 just to go with something that we know will go the whole 9 yards and get us to closing without having a big fat question mark over it. So yeah, there's so many nuances, which is why, Mike, I'm tickled at the result of this debauchery of a trial that went on in Missouri with the plaintiffs, the home sellers versus NAR and Keller Williams and Redfin and whoever the hell else they named. They just went after deep pockets is what they did. And it's the conversations, though, the pundits and the self-made pundits, by the way, on social media. I don't know why some of you guys follow them. But they love the scare rhetoric because it's clickbait. Yeah. They love posting a thumbnail on YouTube that says realtors are done because they know you will click on it. But the reality is that the real estate industry at large, everything that we're talking about here, all these nuanced ways to navigate, right? The market and offers and valuations and investments. You don't want to go at that alone. It is not as simple as saying 123 Main Street is listed on the market at 500,000. I can go and make my own offer. I don't need an agent. For everything over the last, what have we been doing this, Mike? An hour and a half, the last 2 hours, for everything in this interview that we've been talking about. This is why you want qualified professionals. Now, and this is also why they're going to appeal it. And this whole thing is not going to go anywhere because that was basically a bias verdict that came out. One, the defense was laughable at best. The defense attorney was not the right guy for the job. And, frankly, his arguments were not well crafted. And he was allowing the red herrings that they were interjecting into the conversation to proliferate. And he should have quashed them immediately. And he didn't quash them. But the reason why we know that, the real estate industry is not going to be rocked by this, you guys. Commissions have always been negotiable and they always will be negotiable. They were negotiable before the National Association of Realtors was even established. And it's well known in our industry. I mean, I do deals, I do listings all the time from anywhere from $500 to 6%. And it depends on the situation and what we're dealing with. Am I dealing with somebody that's upside down? I'm not going to go in there and make a big money grab to try to help a seller move a property when they're already underwater. So there's a reason why. Sure. Anyways, this was a giant smoke and mirrors show. But I shudder to think about consumers navigating this market without experienced counsel. If anybody wants to make an argument that is justified and accurate against the real estate industry, it is that the barrier to entry is ridiculously low. If we want to make quality improvements in the real estate industry because they're needed, make the barrier to entry substantially greater. We make way too much money for the barrier to entry to be this low. Yeah.
Yeah. There were so many people that hopped into the industry in real estate in 2020 and 2021 because it was an easy buck to make. Right. It is not hard. You pay a licensing fee, you take a class, you take a test, and boom, you're a realtor. That does not mean you can effectively guide a client, advise them on the market, have industry knowledge and those types of things. So yeah, no, you're absolutely right. The barrier to entry is far too low. At the heart of that case was, basically the argument that agents are somehow conspiring with each other to keep commissions high. And I've been doing this 20 years. 2003 is when I started. I've never personally heard of two agents getting together to conspire to keep their commissions high. That's just not part of the conversation.
It's crazy. It's crazy to even postulate that. It's insane. Like we can't do that. When I'm looking in the MLS, I see what the cooperating broker is being offered, and thank God buyers don't have to pay. Right? They've already got their closing cost expenses. They don't need to be paying for more expenses.
Yeah. So if people don't understand, if they're watching this video, not sure what the big deal is about. So in our industry, and this goes back probably 100 years. This is a long time ago. Real estate agents have been paid when a home sells, that seller pays both agents, right? The buyers and the listing side. And when they buy a home, they pay no agents. They don't pay their own agent or the other side. And that's just the way it's worked. And when you think about it, just from a fundamental concept of where the money is available at the time, the sellers have more money available because there's an asset with equity. And the buyers generally do not have money available. So if we go into a world where the buyer has to pay their own agent, I mean, that's going to dramatically impact the number of people that can afford it. And so it's going to remove a lot of buyers. That will then decrease demand. Now you're a home seller, you've got reduced demand. Now your price is probably going down, right? Because you don't have as many people that want to buy your house.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the price point is set by supply and demand. And think about it too. If you're a seller and you decide like, okay, I'm not going to accept anybody's offer. Maybe it becomes a choice, right? Where the seller can say, all right, I will pay the buyer's agent or I will not pay the buyer's agent. Again, you're making a choice to reduce the number of people that are able to buy your house.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just quite simply what you're doing.
Well, absolutely.
And so that's not that will probably the 3% that would in our market typically go to the buyer side. You may see a price reduction in your house of far greater than 3% because you don't have enough buyers.
Yeah, well, for sure. And it's, and again, like I said, it's the conversation again. Like I said, I hate that I feel like we collectively we're really lacking critical thinking skills as a population, as a species, as a populace. It's super frustrating because the question, right? The question in the trial was, do listing agents and selling agents meaning the buyer's agents, do they conspire to set commissions? The answer is no, period, in a discussion. The red herrings that were that was the emotional argument that clouded this entire thing was, are agents worth paying at all, right? Do they bring value? Should we be paying a buyer's agent? That was the conversation that should never have taken place to come to an outcome on this trial. The outcome on the trial was, do we conspire to set commissions? The answer is unequivocally no, because commissions have always been and always will be negotiable. But again, nobody did a deep dive into this damn trial. It was a freaking kangaroo.
It went so
court.
fast too.
Yeah,
I was shocked how fast it went. Yeah,
because they were these guys in the jury were like, yeah, we're good old Missouri boys. We're going to award these plaintiffs some money and make them rich. Yeah. It was a jab at the industry.
Yeah. And, and if you're a seller and you're looking at that going, well, why am I paying the other side's agent? Well, just remember that in order to acquire that home, you bought it and you didn't pay any agent, including yours at that time, right? So like the argument that somebody has somehow lost out is asinine, because somewhere along the line, you didn't have to pay an agent and now you're paying two agents, right? It works out to be the same in the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't get it. If you are a home buyer or a home seller and you are thinking like, okay, I can do this on my own, the agent isn't worth this much, then go try it. Like think about it. Like think about what goes into that, right? And what I mean by that is, like, you're a home buyer and you see somebody with a house listed, there's a sign in the yard and there's an agent such as yourself, right? That's going to now negotiate on behalf of their seller, and you're a buyer and you want to approach them. Where do you get the forms? How do you fill them in? What are the inspection contingencies? What are the legal protections? When are your contingencies up? When are you going to lose your earnest money that you put forward? How much is a smart amount of earnest money? Is the price fair? Do you have access to the data
where
to determine
is the
if
earnest
the price
money
is
being
fair?
retained? That is another one.
Yeah, where is it being retained?
Is it at the title company? Is it with the buyer's broker? So just a quick news flash here. Public service announcement. Earnest money traditionally, Mike, used to always be held with the responsible broker. The responsible broker is typically the one representing the buyer. I have literally successfully gone to court over and the real estate commission fined this broker. This was a broker who had been in this valley for 30 freaking years. And he irresponsibly gave the earnest money back to his buyer when contractually it was owed to the seller. Wow. And we took it. We got a civil ruling on it. The real estate commission came after this guy, and he knew that he was breaking the law, and he was banking on, will they come and push back and fight this? And just for principle alone, my seller and I did push back and fight it, and we won. But sellers, when you're signing your purchase and sale agreements, we don't want the earnest money with the buyer's representation, because if they want to breach contract, who do you think they have a bias towards? their own client.
Yeah,
They don't want to. They don't want to
absolutely.
step
Yeah.
on their own client's feet because that's business for them. It needs to be at the closing company.
Yep. But yeah, who's the title company going to be? Is there an escrow officer there? What's the closing time frame? Is there going to be delayed possession? Is there going to be any other special contingencies at closing? You have to set up an inspection. You have to set up the appraisal. You have to set up possibly other inspections like septic or well or foundation or roof, right? These are all things that a real estate agent does. Everyone I think has the idea that they put a sign in the yard, then they publish something on this mythical MLS, and that is it. I mean, there is so much more that goes into it. And like I said, just try to be a buyer and think about all those things that I just mentioned. Yeah. And then not only that, but if you're a buyer and you're unrepresented, let's say this just plays out and the buyers aren't paying commissions or anything more. A savvy agent such as yourself that has a listing is going to eat those unrepresented buyers alive in the negotiation. They're going to be unprotected. They're going to lose money. They're going to have no ability to go back and legally go after anything if there are things that are not done. I mean, these are savvy professionals. They're just going to tear them up at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and going back to, again, our litigiously minded nation, right? Which is sometimes appropriate, sometimes not, way over-exercised at times. But when you go to a good broker, you are under the protection of my errors and omissions insurance. I've got a multi-million-dollar policy to protect you from, non-disclosures, things that can go sideways. There's a lot of reasons why, even just for the umbrella of the protection, if you go to sue, right? Let's say there were serious damages, and I probably should do a whole separate video on a lot of damages that have happened, and just to give a case example, across the country, because in our, we study them statewide. Like when we have to go and get, our continuing education, we study when shit has hit the fan in real estate transactions, and they've gone to the Supreme Court, or they've gone, they've gone through the court system, and how judges rule on that. But when you're protected under the, just to have the protection for the errors and omissions insurance, if you go to sue somebody, right, you can't, that's great that you get a judgment. Collecting is 90% of the battle. And so you want to have the errors and omissions insurance there, because if there's a judgment, guess what? You're going to get paid. So there's all kinds of funny stuff going on with the rhetoric around this trial right now. And I'm like, I'm pulling my hair out because it's stupid, for lack of a better word. It is stupidity on showcase right now. For all of the things that we talked about, Mike, in this interview, there's a million reasons why you want to connect with somebody experienced with tenure in the business, and the reason why consumers don't. And this is shame on my industry, right? It's because the barrier to entry is low. So a lot of consumers have had a bad experience with a bad agent, and they're like, what the hell were they there for? They were just a warm body, taking in oxygen and expelling or carbon dioxide. They weren't there for anything. So I get it. But
well, and if you're a buyer, I mean, just take it a fundamental level. Let's say you're looking at homes and you drive down a street, like, oh, this is a nice street. I could live here. The school's nearby, and here's a home listed for $450,000, and here's one down the street for $525,000. How do you know whether either of those prices are fair?
You don't.
Right? Like, how do you know what's the comparison?
You
right?
don't.
Maybe one's priced really well and one's priced really poorly. Maybe the one priced really well is $525 and the one priced poorly is $450. But you're not going to know. You don't have access to the data and why the homes are different. The features, and how much is an extra bedroom worth?
Yes.
How much is that worth?
Yes.
You just don't know. And then as a lender, like, we have appraisals and things like that. So you could get yourself into a real serious bind by buying the wrong house that doesn't appraise. And now you've lost your earnest money, or you have to bring more money to the table, because our appraisal is going to be true to the market, right? And it's going to match up with what a professional agent believes. So there's just so many reasons why it is ridiculous. You mentioned though, right off the top, I mean, this is going to get appealed, and whatever the outcome of this, it's going to take a very, very long time before any of this plays out. So
all these plaintiffs wanted, it was a money grab. This is a money grab.
Yeah, it's really only a money grab for the attorneys, right? They're going to make a ton off of this. And the actual plaintiffs in the case, when you do the math on how many plaintiffs are involved in the class action suit, along with what the award was, like they're getting like hundreds of dollars, which, hey, we'll take everything that we can, but as consumers, but like it's really not a financial windfall,
Yeah.
right? It's just the attorneys, right? And now they're going to propagate this around the country and try to get the same windfall for themselves, right? If you want to talk about a profession that maybe sometimes needs some regulation and things. I mean, there's a lot of people that have certain thoughts about attorneys in those types of cases, but yeah, it's a. I mean, we'll obviously we'll see. We'll see what the outcome is and everything. Eventually, when it comes right down to it, when there's more time spent and a better defense, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's really you can't take away the ability for a buyer to be represented and not have the buyer's agent be compensated, because you need that representation, right? It's like having a good medical provider, right? You don't want to necessarily go to the cheapest doctor, right? Like that's not the time to bargain hunt. And I would argue the same thing in real estate. It's just too big of a financial decision, and it is. Real estate is by far the number one way that most Americans grow wealth, right?
Mm-hmm.
You take the average American who will, these days will finish their life, hopefully, with anything from about 1 to 1.5 million or less in net worth, right? Like that's just where most Americans end up. The overwhelming majority of that, unless you become uber wealthy, is from your home
Yeah.
that you own.
Well, it's true, Mike. I mean, I'm a high income earner, but I bring my income in and I spend it. I reinvest it. I'm building other businesses. Every dime that I earn, I try to spend it. Why? It's to limit my tax burden, but my wealth has been built in strategic real estate acquisitions, for buying a foreclosure at the right time, getting a massive home equity line of credit against the equity of the property so that I can then go out and buy other real estate investments, and to keep using debt strategically to acquire assets and build wealth. I mean, that is how it's done. And before we get off on a tangent, in conclusion on this NAR lawsuit, it was a kangaroo court. It was a debauchery of a lawsuit. There is no damages that you could possibly prove, for the plaintiffs, because commission has always been negotiable, and those sellers that were sitting in there, really shame on them for, it was almost like, it's like we look back in history and we were like, how did the Salem witch trials actually occur? How were people so damn stupid that the Salem witch trials was a real thing? And that is how I feel about this trial, because those sellers could have easily not hired Remax, and they could have come to me, a mom and pop brokerage. I am an independent broker. I am not part of a franchise. You could have come to me and you could have negotiated your commission down to 4%, right? And I would have taken one, and I would have gladly offered 3 to incentivize the agents that have the buyers to bring their buyers to me. That is a part of my marketing. If I offer 2.5 or 3, all of those decisions are a part of my marketing. You are signing a listing agreement with me, because if I bring the buyer, I'm getting paid the whole amount, right? So you're paying whatever you put and agree upon and negotiate. You are paying whatever you negotiate with a listing broker. You're paying that whether there's a buyer's agent or not.
Yeah. Well, these sellers that won this case, right, and they're looking for money because they were somehow cheated into paying the buyer's agent. I'd be very curious to see if the homeowner that owned their house prior to them, that they purchased without paying an agent on the buyer's side, are they willing to reimburse that previous owner because they didn't pay an agent when they acquired the house? So
it's so
where does it stop?
It doesn't stop. It doesn't stop because it's illogical, right?
Like even just your market crash, like I'm not sure about that, the market crashes, but basically if the two things that you brought up in there come true, then it probably does crash, so that's kind of the way I look at it.
We're from everything I'm researching. I mean, I've heard some good rhetoric around us being in a super cycle, so it's like we would technically be coming down now, but they think that's going to be an extended 2 to 3 year period of either, stagnation or growth. Like people don't think we're going to be dropping down.
Then a fall?
I mean, it's hard. Yeah, I mean, because there's a good argument for there's a good argument right now that a lot of people, and I think you even touched on this when we were, did
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
first edit a couple days ago, but you had touched on this with, you've got a lot of people right now sitting on
Yeah.
equity. They've got equity in their home. They feel liquid. They feel like they've got
Yeah.
good equity. And they've got low rates, and so or they've got a $700,000 house, and they only owe 150 on it. So a lot, and there's a lot of those people in the country right now. But the problem is that, like in 2008, all of that equity, that equity can fluctuate. Your house may not be worth 700,000, and that's what we're all worried about, is if prices suddenly plummet again, because we have an affordability crisis, because we have the credit card debt has surpassed $1 trillion, which is higher than we've ever seen it. So really, frankly, we're in uncharted territory with credit debt. And like you had said, we're already seeing auto loan defaults. We're not necessarily seeing it in the credit card industry right now with credit defaults, but we're seeing it in the auto loan industry. People are starting to not pay their, they're getting behind on their auto loans. So, we're in uncharted territory, I think, when it comes to the national credit debt. And, and so we could very well be in a super cycle. It's all anecdotal, Mike. I don't, it's even, you could probably go to some of the best analysts, economic and real estate analysts. And even they're going to tell you that there's some things right now that we haven't seen before, and like going back to what we had touched on with political migration, that was something that in my opinion, artificially manipulated the real estate industry in several key markets over the last 3 years when we saw that boom. And I don't believe if we had had all of the crazy COVID lockdowns and COVID regulations and the response to the pandemic, that we would have seen all of the migration that caused this massive increase in home values. Because California is still California, there's still a lot of employment opportunity there. But the interesting part is I was really expecting California's overall valuation in the residential real estate sector to decline, because we saw a mass exodus of businesses as well out of California into places like Texas and Florida for better tax incentives. So I don't know. We could very well be in a super cycle. The market could, it could tank. Is the market going to collapse? Is it not going to collapse? During the pandemic, for the first time ever, as 1099 contractors, the real estate profession lobbied for unemployment rights, because at the inception of COVID, we thought we were all going to be, totally jobless, and there weren't going to be any transactions transacting, but the absolute opposite happened, and so if everybody, and I always say, watch what people do, not what they say. Right. And so the fact that the whole industry collectively went and did the lobbying to get the unemployment benefits tells me that everybody thought the real estate market was going to collapse, and it did the exact opposite. So regardless of all of the pundits and the rhetoric that's floating around online and in media, the fact is that nobody really quite knows what the fuck is going on right now and what is in the foreseeable future. And so I guess, anybody listening into our conversation, I would just say that somebody, as a 10-year real estate professional and a top producing broker owner, and even you being in the top 0.5% of loan officers nationwide, according to Scotsman Guide, we don't have a crystal ball. This is our wheelhouse and something we do, 7 days a week, 365. It's, we're still kind of like, all right, we understand some of these foundational elements floating around. We understand the debt. We understand the inventory problem. We understand supply and demand. I see a lot of comments online, it's supply and demand. It's like, yes, but then we got to drill a layer deeper. And what are the causal relationships within supply and within
Yeah.
demand. And this is where we get into unemployment rates.
Mm-hmm.
This is where we get into interest rates. So even though there's an impending
Mm-hmm.
crash that could be coming theoretically
Mm-hmm.
next year or sometime in the next 3 years, it's people will still be buying and selling real estate. And frankly, this now going back into consumer oriented advice, this is why it's important for, people with cash to wait for those prices to come down so that you can go in there and get a good deal. That way, when everything rebounds and stabilizes, which it absolutely is going to, you've got great equity proposition in front of you.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, you mentioned it that, even us doing this, our professions as well as we do. And I know I personally spend a lot of time researching, what's going on with the economy and what's projected for the future and those kinds of things. It's still a mystery as to exactly what will happen.
Yeah.
I'm not a big believer that there's a crash next year. However, if one happened, would I be shocked by that? No. There are reasons why something could occur. So it's even tougher on a consumer. And if they, cash is a very powerful thing. So that can give you a lot of leverage in transactions. However, there's been people talking about a real estate crash since 2014. Diana Olick on CNBC. I mean, she's a horrible prognosticator. If people had listened to her since 2014, you would literally be out hundreds of thousands, if not even millions of dollars, right, in real estate. And every time it's the same for her, right? Real estate is crashing. Real estate is crashing. Hasn't happened. That now a clock is right twice a day, right? A broken clock is right twice a day. So we'll see. We'll see. Eventually, she'll be right, but for the most part, her prognostications have been horrible for the last eight almost 10 years. Yeah.
Well, I think for the stock market, that would be like the Jim Cramer, right? It's like constantly, but like it's like these sound bites, and I always say there's things that sound good, and this is where media is in hot water all the time. They love to propagate fear, right? Like that's because people will tune in more to that than they will, the clouds, the sky is blue and the sun is out and everything is wonderful. People would rather hear about impending doom, and it's just the way that we're psychologically oriented as a species, which is fine, right? But I think in media there needs to be, just like an ethics around, like you said, being a prognosticator. I like that.
Yeah. One of the big problems with a lot of the people that have been touting foreclosure, the people that have been, saying the market's going to crash, for a long time, is they do look at the housing market. They treat it similarly to stocks, right? You just mentioned that triggered this thought in my head. And that's just not the way to look at a house. A house is not a stock. It's not a disposable asset, right? For most people, outside of investors, for most people, the house is a place that you live first and foremost, right? It's a roof. It's a sanctuary. It is not at its core an investment. Now, it turns out that over time, it becomes a wonderful investment. It's how most Americans grow their net worth and grow wealth. But the thing is when you see the stock market crash, you can freak out. You can sell a stock on a computer in a matter of a few minutes and be done with it. You can't do that with your house, right? You can't move it that quickly. You have to have somewhere else to go, right? So the American consumer and the general public, you're not going to look at it as a stock. You're much more invested in it. And you're not going to just panic sell because you have to have an alternative on where else you go. And so I think that's where some of these people on Twitter and some of the other places where they lose that perspective on what a house means to people, right? For most families, you can't come home. You can't be a 45-year-old guy, come home and tell your wife, like, honey, we got to sell the house. The market's going to crash next month. Okay, great. Like, what are we going to do after that?
For sure.
So.
Well, and a lot of times you're buying and selling in the same damn market. So, the universe is a great equalizer, and people forget that. I just met with a buyer yesterday who I'll be sending to you, by the way, hopefully this coming week. But, she's going through a divorce, and they're going to sell their property, but she's also going to be purchasing. And so it's a double-edged sword. You're going to be selling in a down market and buying in a down market. But, the positive thing is, yes, you may lose some equity, but guess what? had you sold in an up market, right, you would have been spending
Yep.
that money in an up
Yep.
market. So it's just a great equalizer. And that's why, and even with buyers trying to navigate rates right now, it's marry the real estate,
Mm-hmm.
date the rate, right? Marry the property,
Yeah.
date the rate, because the rule of thumb is you still want to get into ownership. Like, I am anti great reset. What did they predict by 2030? It's going to be the great reset where you will own nothing and you will be happier than you've ever been in your life. And it's like, that is
Yeah.
bullshit.
Yeah.
First off,
I have
you
not heard that.
Have
No,
you
that's
heard
a
that?
new one.
Oh, that is a theory that's floating around out there in the online ether. Is there's supposed to be some kind of great financial reset. I don't know if this shit originates with the people that also think the Illuminati is real, or we're being run by blue lizards, or whatever the theory is. I trust me, I try not to get knee deep in conspiracy theories, but there is a theory out there that there's a great reset coming financially, and here's where I think this comes from, right? There's always kind of like that element of truth, and then people conflate too many ideas, and then it becomes something that it shouldn't be. But wealth, it flows up. Why? Because think about most structures in life. They are shaped somewhat like a pyramid, and the base has got to be stable. The base is always going to be larger than the top. And we are a society of consumers. And so when the government goes and just prints money, right? Yes, that may be initially disseminated down below, but that's because we then buy things that belong to the corporations, and that money continues to trickle up just through the economic infrastructure. That's the way that it works. And so, the guys up top, they love it when the government prints money, because they know that eventually it's going to end up in their bank accounts, because middle to lower class, which again is the largest sector of the population that we have, they spend their money. They don't invest it into assets. They're living paycheck to paycheck, and they use the money that they earn working for somebody else to then go and buy other things. And so it's kind of an unfortunate conundrum. But this whole great reset concept of 2030, you will own nothing and be happier than you've ever been, is essentially this wealth distribution. And this would be interesting to pull articles, and I'll try to do this in the description of this conversation on YouTube. But there are really interesting articles on how just over COVID in the last 3 years, there was radical wealth distribution, and sincerely, the rich only got richer. In the meantime, the middle class is getting eaten alive. So it's just, I don't know, our country's, I think we're hanging on by a thread right now, which is why more than ever, we really need leadership. Because not only is there a financial divide happening, and that chasm is widening, but there is a ideological divide as well amongst us. So we're not usually, healthy societies are relatively homogenous, right? We have similar, that we have a foundation of values. We have a foundation of principles. We have a foundation of expectations on societal norms. And all of that has just been thrown out the window. It's almost like, we're in crazy times right now. And so we just need good leadership at this point. And it's almost like that's just too hard to ask for.
It's tough. Right, it's tough. When you look at government and where politics is these days, I think, I think one of the things that happens is that our best and brightest just don't go into politics. Right? Like, if you're a phenomenal CEO, you're running a great company, why would you put yourself through the hassle of being in politics, right? And it doesn't matter what side you're on, right? You're on the right, you're on the left, you're red, you're blue. Half the people hate you, half the people love you, and it doesn't even matter what you're saying. They hate anything that you say at that point. And why, if you're a private citizen, I don't see the motivation to go through that. If you're good at what you do. I'm fortunate to work for a company that has just an unbelievable leader. I mean, we are really blessed to have a fantastic owner and CEO of our company. And
Movement Mortgage is amazing.
He is literally one of the easiest people I've ever had the pleasure of following. He's so easy to just get behind, and his name is Casey Crawford. And there's part of me that thinks like, oh man, I would love to see him in politics, but I just think it's a dirty game, and it doesn't allow people to truly be themselves. And
Nope.
Oh man, like I think you have to make the backroom deals, right? And you can't be above
Yeah.
board and out in the open with things. I believe that's
Yeah.
the case. Yeah.
Well, I'm optimistic with, RFK Jr.'s, Robert
Yeah.
Kennedy's platform. I mean, he seems like a pretty out in the
He
open
does.
guy. You never know, but I'm optimistic about, about him running. And it's interesting, I think he's going to be a disruptor in this next
Yeah.
coming election, pulling
Yeah.
votes, from both
Yeah.
sides of the aisle. So that'll be really neat. But I guess the underlying question is, is our government, is the election even a valid
Yeah.
election, right? So I don't, and I'm not even gonna, I won't even go into depth on that because I don't have any facts to back up
Yeah.
what my opinions are, other than just what you have seen, and then trying to intelligently put two and two together. And and so it's hopefully our democracy is not
Yeah.
lost. You know what I mean? Elections are not rigged, they are valid. There is still integrity in voting. So we'll see. I think if we have lost integrity in voting, Mike, then democracy
Oh,
is
sure. Yeah.
gone.
Absolutely.
And we're looking more and more like
Yeah. Yeah.
Venezuela.
Absolutely.
And so that, and then when that happens, and democracy is gone, then you do start to look like, Venezuela, and you leave this open for a cartel to
Yeah.
come in and run the
Yeah.
country. So anyways, all right, we'll get off that talk. But yeah, movement's an amazing company. And yes, good men like Casey, it's hard to, imagine them, dragging their family
Yeah.
through that circus and going through politics. It's kind of like it just feels like it used to be an honor to run.
Yeah.
It was a public service and a public duty, and good men, with good morals, who were oriented correctly, would run. And that just doesn't seem like it's the case anymore.
So yeah, so in politics, in our government, whether you like Trump, you like Biden, you like Obama, you like Bush, one of the things that I think is very interesting is, we as the public and the media, we treat it as if the president comes in and just does whatever he wants. And that is not how our system works, right? You have to have a whole bunch of other people behind you that agree with you and that you've made some deals with to get them on your side. And so I find the just general blame of one person for whatever it is, right? Or even if you give them the successes, like that's just not how our system is set up to work. You need a lot of people behind you.
Yeah.
Obama's last 4 years, the Republicans ran the other, they ran the House and the Senate. So It's really a deadlock at that point, right? It's kind of gridlock. Yeah. So yeah, no, it's just an interesting thing. So there's part of me that likes the English system actually a little bit better, where they elect the parliament, and the leader of the party that takes control of parliament becomes the prime minister. Right. That's how their system works. So they always have kind of a majority rule. And, there's something that sounds good about that to me, in that at least that party gets to institute their policies for the foreseeable future. Right. There's not this kind of gridlock, deadlock, because whether you agree or disagree, at least you get to try something. Yeah.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. I think we need a good solid 8 years of just quality leadership. But it's, again, I feel that, like I said, that ideological divide in our own country, like the people are divided. Sure. And so how do you get a divided populace behind a singular figurehead? I mean, it's almost tragic. I mean, I really hope over the next 30 years, because I'm in my 30s. I just hope the next 30 years of my life is not going to be this, kind of macabre, depressing situation where you're like, wow, this country that had so much going for it is just slowly crumbling down around me, systemically, financially, ideologically. I really hope that that's not the case. I hope this was just a bad past 4 years and something, good moves forward out of this. Right. And I always say, things have to get worse before they get better. Right. So I think that works on a micro level with the individual, and it works on a macro level with the population. Because people have to kind of, it's like we're always playing with fire as human beings. It's wild. We come out of the caves, cavemen making fire, and we just keep going back to wanting to play with fire. Yeah. We got to kind of see where our pain threshold is and just barely put our skin on it. And then, okay, that's where it is. All right, we're going to back away now. So that's what we're doing
Yeah.
right now. But anyway, so let's go back to, we got into this conversation based off of just leadership. We need good leadership. We need the economy to balance out and fix itself. I definitely, I think a capitalist society is still the best society, because capitalism kind of is like, it's like its own enigma. I mean, it really works itself out through this, osmosis and supply and demand. And it's, that's good that we're in a capitalist society, and when it needs to stay that way. But we've got to stop kind of, I think, like I said, there was a lot of artificial maneuvers in the real estate market, one of them being political migration. Markets like Idaho, Texas, Tennessee, Nashville saw this, huge migration into them. And then, and of course, other kind of bluer areas, bluer cities where there was a lot of radical imposition by, regulation, COVID regulations. Families were flocking out of there for one reason or another, whether it was taxes, whether it was a homeless issue, whether it was, they didn't want their children vaccinated, just all kinds of reasons, at least as boots on the ground from my perspective, relocating these families into this market. That was what I had heard, right? That's my qualitative feedback for you, not my quantitative feedback, but my qualitative feedback is people had very real, viable reasons to be moving out of blue cities and into red states and markets. Will we see that happen again this year? The wild card for everybody is the election, right? If we see, the wild card's the election. So we'll see what happens next year. We could also see, again, an artificial stimulation of rates, pressure downward, because there's always pressure downward on rates moving into an election. And if summer of 2024 rates go down into the fives, I think we're going to see a feeding frenzy again. So that could, home prices could jump back up another 10 to 15%. So we just don't know, we kind of know what could happen, but things just kind of, end up happening, and you got to roll with the punches. And so that's where I think you fall back into principles and rules of thumb, right? What is the rule of thumb here? Rule of thumb is try not to buy assets on the way up, right? Let's not chase. I did this with Bitcoin and I got my ass handed to me. So I was a little late to the game. Everybody was like, prices were already going up, and people were like, no, they're going to keep going up. And then and then they go down. So yay, but follow my own advice. But with real estate, people who were buying real estate in the last 3 years as prices were going up, I mean, you broke a rule of thumb. All right. You bought a property as it was going up. It is what it is. Okay. Now prices have come down. So when I have people, and I had hundreds of comments on my market video, people were saying, is it a good time to buy right now? Well, what's your local market, right? I mean, I can't give you advice for niche markets that don't in some way, shape, or form mimic Boise, Idaho. But what I can tell you is prices nationally, prices regionally, locally have come down. And so rule of thumb is buy when they've come down, because we can't time the bottom and we can't time the top. To round out our conversation, what is your, again, I guess your best advice for your buyers right now in this market, the clients that you're currently dealing with, the new clients that have come to you that are looking to qualify, in like a 2 to 3 minute summary, like what's your best advice for them?
I guess what I would say is don't automatically rule out buying a home just simply because you believe that rates are high. Right. Let's explore the finances. If it ends up not being the right fit for you, that's okay. Right. That's a decision, but we want to make an educated, informed decision with all the variables at play. We know that home buying is the number one way that the average American grows wealth. It has been proven in study after study, that acquiring net worth comes from having a home, right? Unless you're uber wealthy, that's where your net worth comes from, is a home. So do the due diligence. Let's check out your finances and then check out the market. You might be surprised. And at this point, at least, we haven't had that market crash, right, that we've talked about. So you can buy a home. It's ultimately for shelter. It is not an investment. It just happens to be a great investment over time. But buy the home for shelter. Find something you're comfortable with, you can financially live with. when you do the comparison between buying and renting, make sure you factor in that your mortgage on a house is essentially fixed outside of minor fluctuations in taxes and insurance. It's going to stay the same as long as you have that home and mortgage. Whereas the rent that you pay today is going to go up almost every single year. And most analyses show that the rent will catch up to the mortgage in about 5 or 6 years, right? That's typically what happens. So you got to build in that. And when you're renting right now, you literally get nothing out of that other than the roof over your head, right? Every dollar that you send in goes to somebody else. There's nothing you get. There's a saying in our industry that rent is 100% interest because you literally get nothing out of it. Every time you make a payment on a mortgage, it's kind of like a forced savings account.
I'd rather pay the 100% interest, Mike, than the 7.5%. Damn it.
Yeah. But when you send in a $3,000 mortgage payment, depending on taxes and insurance, if you think you probably have $400 or $500, maybe $600 of that goes into this little savings account, right? It's not your Wells Fargo. It's not your credit union account. It's not something like that. It's your house. And over time, you accumulate tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in that, right? And that's where the wealth building comes from, not to mention the appreciation over time, the tax write-offs, which we haven't even gotten to. I mean, there's so many benefits. And again, I'm not saying everybody needs to buy a home. There are some situations that it's maybe not the right feel for you. Maybe you don't qualify. Maybe you're just not financially comfortable. But it's something, don't automatically exclude it. Let's explore it in an educated, informed way. And one last point on that too, for the most part, people's incomes go up over time, for the most part, right? Most people, whether they're doing our jobs, whether they are working at Walmart, at a bank, at Simplot here in our local economy, Micron as an engineer, most people's incomes go up over time. A mortgage is fixed. So the toughest time that you have paying a mortgage is generally going to be the first year. The next year, you're going to get a raise. It gets a little bit easier. Year after that, you got another raise. It gets a little bit easier. And so that expense in your life actually goes down as time goes on because most people make more money over time.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Mike, so thank you for coming on my show and dealing with all the tech issues with me as I, get my bearings on my very first remote
I think I've had my fair share here too.
We've been swapping out batteries and all kinds of crazy stuff. So, but like I said, thank you so much. And I can't emphasize again, you are a lone stud. You're a very, very awesome and amazing partner to me and our clients and your buyers. The counsel that you give is, it's bar none. I know this after 7+ years working with you that, I have buyers that get crappy advice from other lenders. They get falsely denied by other lenders, and you fix their file and you get them qualified. There is a strategy that you apply that new lenders, that rookie lenders, that lenders that frankly lack intelligence. They are checker players, not chess players. They just don't have the processing power to apply strategy, right? You really fix a lot of that stuff. And so I hope buyers, pulled some useful information out of this conversation. And, certainly we'll do more conversations in the future. Hopefully we get a lot of comments. What I love is comments. I love seeing the comments, the questions, people that, have a difference of opinion than something that we shared, because then those are things that we can touch on in the next conversation and either expound on, extrapolate from. So the comments are great. And if there's been anything left, desired in this conversation, by all means, I'd love to see commentary on it. Or things that you even disagree with. Whoever, is watching this right now, if there's something you disagree with, please put it in the comments, share your opinions with us. Because some of these are, anecdotal. And these are certainly just our personal opinions from where we stand and where we sit, being in the business as long as we've been, and doing the production that you and I have both done. So this was a super fun conversation for me. And, and as always, thank you so much for your time and wisdom.
Well, this was awesome. It was so much fun. I can't believe it's already been like 2 hours. And I feel like there's so many topics that we could touch on and hit. I mean, we could go through so much more. So I'm looking forward to doing it again. And, people should just know if they're looking for great real estate representation, I mean, you really are. I mean, you come you come at this business with such an energy and a passion. And I will say, like, I get a chance to work with a lot of different agents. I don't have anybody that negotiates and works on behalf of their client as hard as you do. I mean, you are really, when you are in, you are all in.
Thanks.
And that's what I think that's what people are going to look for, and why, and that's why you've been so successful and why you earn referrals and repeat business, because you leave no doubt whose side you are on. That is for sure. So,
well, it's just all you have to do is go through my Zillow reviews, and you'll see the pit bull mentioned a couple times throughout there.
Bulldog. I've used the word bulldog. Yep, bulldog. So the even going back to the court case here recently. I mean, you conspire with another agent just as asinine because you're looking out for your client first. Yeah. And so, I mean, that's what it's about.
Well, it's a relationship business, Mike, for you and for me and for agents. Like oh God, I couldn't even imagine burning bridges left and right. I mean, I want to get you the best deal because I want you to be a client for life. I want you to refer your family and friends to me. And so no, even though we might make slightly more money off of a somewhat higher sales price, it's what $100,000 is an extra $2,500 or $3,000. That's not enough for somebody to get nefarious over. I mean, it's silly to say that, but it's like, sometimes buyers think, oh, they're going to they're not working in my best interest. And it's like, it just simply doesn't work that way. We want you to be ecstatic with us because we know that that's going to secure repeat and referral business.
Well, and that's a great point on why you want to work with successful people in lending and real estate, right? Because you just hit the nail on the head. Like the difference in commission for you over $100,000, or for me, it's even less than that for me. Like, we're successful enough that doesn't move the needle.
Yeah.
So like, we're still going to provide our best advice. Whereas if you're working with somebody that's really struggling, scraping to get by, doesn't have transactions, that might be the difference for them. Yeah. Right. That's a possibility. That's a real distinct, thing that you need to be aware of.
Well, and Mike, I tell buyers that all the time. I say, even this there was a recent listing, and she had interviewed a couple of other heavy hitters here, and she was a referral. And she had interviewed a couple of heavy hitters here in town, and I got the listing. And I'm very casual. I do not go in with a freaking pitch deck and a listing presentation. I mean, I really go rogue. I am not your traditional top producer, used car salesman that everybody likes to throw out there when they think of real estate agents. I don't go in there, with a, Balmain jacket on. I mean, I'm casual and I'm talking to you like you're a friend, like your family. But anyways, I got that listing, but I told her, I said, listen, because she was saying, oh, her neighbor across the street was also licensed. And I said, you don't want to work with somebody who is not solvent. You want to work with somebody that is financially very secure and stable, right? They are top producers. They are high income earners, because I do not need to sell your listing to pay my bills next month. And so that's very important, because desperate people do desperate things. Yeah. And it's not because people are innately evil or innately bad, although we don't want to get into that philosophical conversation, because certainly there's interesting philosophies, but it's because desperate people do desperate things. This is why having a city littered with a homeless population is a scary thing, because people who are desperate will do desperate things. And sometimes those are very bad things, and they can harm people around them, and they can harm society around them. So, but anyways, thank you for those compliments. I appreciate it. It's a tough business, and you and I work, 7 days a week. We're here filming this on a Sunday, and we hustle because, in part we love what we do, but we're kind of addicted to being successful and learning our business and doing a good job. And so anyway, so thank you. We'll definitely do this again. Like I said, we'll pivot based off of comments, and hopefully we get some cool shorts out of this too that spark an interesting conversation, and I'll have you back on for sure, Mike.
Yeah, love to do it. I'm excited. There's so much stuff we didn't even hit on that we could talk about.
I know.